Many thanks, Bongani, for that report. We now turn our focus to a developing story that is drawing attention on the global stage. South Africa finds itself on uneasy ground as concerns mount over the future of its favorable trade relationship with the United States. The tensions come as U.S. President Donald Trump is set to begin his tenure in January. Prominent voices within the Republican Party are urging the incoming Trump administration to reassess South Africa's participation in the African Growth and Opportunity Act called AGOA, particularly with the U.S. adopting a firmer stance towards nations like Russia, China, Iran, and Israel, which has sparked alarm bells in Pretoria. The AGOA trade relationship legislation has provided South African goods with duty-free access to American markets, significantly boosting the nation's economy and sustaining vital employment levels. As calls for revaluation grow louder, we explore what this means for South Africa and its trade interests, as well as the potential ripple effects on the broader African economic landscape. And now joining us to unpack this is Professor Christopher Afoke Isike, Professor of African Politics and International Relations in the Department of Political Sciences, the University of Pretoria. Thank you so much, Professor Christopher, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what specific factors would you say are contributing to the growing concerns about South Africa's participation in AGOA?
Well, it's a whole bunch of things, like you said. It's South Africa's foreign policy, stance towards Russia initially, which has now been kind of corrected with a much more balanced view in terms of how South Africa views or engages with both belligerents, Russia and Ukraine, talking about Russia and Ukraine. And then South Africa's policy towards relationship with Hamas, which saw South Africa take Israel to the International Criminal Court of Justice, the ICJ. Which in many ways affects the United States, considering the relationship that Israel has with the United States. It's also fears around South Africa's participation in the BRICS, and the talks about de-dollarization, of the U.S. dollar, and how that affects U.S. positioning in the global economy. So it's all these factors that are driving concerns in the U.S. And by the way, this is not new. There have been calls in the past for a reevaluation of South Africa's beneficiation from AGOA, and especially under the Biden administration, and they've been largely squashed. So we do not know what this would mean in a Trump administration that may not have the same kind of, sentimental attachment to South Africa that President Biden had.
Okay, so does that now mean that when you look at the trade access that South Africa has enjoyed from the U.S., the possibility of some people not losing their employment status, and of course the overall economic benefits that South Africa could gain from this, by the time Donald Trump assumes office, the possibility of all those privileges could be lost? Is that what we're looking at now?
Yes, they could be lost. If we assume that Trump is going to remove South Africa from the list of beneficiary countries of AGOA. Those privileges could be lost, and they will have, very grim implications for South Africa's economy, in many ways. But they also will come with pluses, for the country. They will provide, for example, an opportunity for South Africa to diversify and actually look inwards, towards strengthening or looking at relations, new markets, access within Africa. For instance, expanding trade with countries like Nigeria that has very huge market potential. So the loss of AGOA, or the potential loss of AGOA, could mean South Africa pivoting more to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area agreement, which it can leverage, to expand trade within Africa. I mentioned Nigeria, Kenya is also another country that they can look at, including even Egypt. So there are opportunities there, and then even within SADC, the Southern African Development Community, there's already ongoing trade, but such, removing South Africa from AGOA could enhance trade within the SADC region and of course the South African Customs Union, which could help to mitigate, the export losses, by fostering regional trade and economic growth and stability within SADC.
Well, you know that if South Africa loses that AGOA status with the U.S., it would affect local businesses, most especially those who actually thrive on exporting their produce or goods, most especially to the U.S. So I'd like to find out if you think diversifying and looking at the local markets in terms of volume and value, they will be able to match up to what the U.S. has been able to do for South Africa in these regards.
Yeah, especially, if you look at the agricultural sector in South Africa, it's exports, significant volumes of agricultural products, such as citrus, wine, and avocados to the US, right? And so if it loses this, it will need to be able to expand, access to markets in some of the countries that I mentioned, using the instrumentality of the AFTA. And then also even in the automotive sector, South Africa's automotive exports to the US, especially looking at vehicles and components, these are things that South Africa has been exporting to the US, and a reevaluation or removal of South Africa from AGOA could reduce export volumes due to increased costs, in US market, and also disrupt supply chains with ripple effects on manufacturing jobs and upstream economy. So if this happens, then the South Africa needs to be able to put policies in place and infrastructure in place, support countries within the continent to beneficiate from this infrastructure development that it should lead and enhance or just improve its value proposition, to encourage trade between it and other countries. But the market is there really in Africa, and you shouldn't be too worried if South Africa looks more inward to the continent than the traditional looking approach or pivoting towards the US, which of course is beneficial, but there are other opportunities, other markets that it can leverage.
Okay. All right. Professor Christopher Afoke Isike, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.